We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic height of meeting physical force with soul force.
The legacy for Dr. King, for me personally, is that I have the benefit of living in a society where at least the ideal is to treat all people with dignity and respect. While at times we fail at this, Dr. King and his contemporaries raised the bar of expectations so that the status quo is not to blindly accept treating others as inferior or superior simply based on the color of their skin.
I'm most impacted by the fact that so many of his beliefs, and the most significant one being for me a philosophy of nonviolent change, were informed by Mahatma Gandhi. As an adherent of this philosophy, this aspect of his legacy personally resonated with me. I deeply believe in the power of learning from various cultural viewpoints, and knowing that Dr. King took inspiration and guidance from an Eastern philosophy made me appreciate his legacy that much more.
Dr. King's legacy is a vital aspect in affording me the opportunity to seek educational opportunities in the U.S.
Lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty, so the song goes. If there's one thing Dr. King taught us, it's that we must lift up every voice, and I mean every voice. We need every voice possible to make this human and humane choir heard.
The banner of a handout pinned to my office wall reads, "I dare to dream and serve and do." In 2009, I led a workshop with elementary students at the A.D. Lewis Community Center in Huntington, West Virginia. And I used that handout to help kids write poems in which they dared to share how they were going to extend the dream of Martin Luther King in their everyday lives. For me, the legacy of Martin Luther King means waking up and finding myself marching with others and joining hands in the great work. It means helping everyone, whoever and wherever they are, to recognize the inequalities and injustices that surround us and take heart and live in joy as we embrace the work of change.
Dr. King has long been an inspirational figure to me and has served most importantly as an example of how to be true to my Christian faith while still being welcoming to those of other faiths. We typically think of Dr. King in terms of being a civil rights hero, which he certainly was. But as a devout Christian and a respected minister, he was also an inspiring interfaith hero. Dr. King recognized that the struggle for civil rights couldn't be waged by Christians alone. He recognized that people of all faith traditions, and even those who did not have a religious commitment, shared the core values of equality and justice.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in particular was important at all levels, from the individual to the national. His marches and gatherings commanded the attention of the nation and galvanized the start of changes that were so long overdue in our society. Civil rights legislation, voting registration initiatives, and the end of Jim Crow laws. But Dr. King profoundly affected Americans on an individual basis too. The I Have a Dream speech is one of the most moving and compelling ever given in this country.
That I know that justice is indivisible. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
In Dr. King's crusade for racial justice, he argued in his letter from Birmingham jail that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, and challenged us to honor the promises of our heritage. He proclaimed as the real heroes of the South those disinterested children of God who, using tactics of nonviolence, sat down at lunch counters and thereby stood up for what is best in the American dream.
He told the crowd, and I quote, "What we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness. but is love and wisdom and compassion toward one another, and a feeling of justice toward those who still suffer within our country, whether they be white or whether they be black.
With King's emphasis on peace and on justice, on respect for everyone, things to which everyone is entitled, I heard basic elements of the gospel echoed and applied in my generation. And that application was the key in driving home those important and lasting values of which he spoke, and which have very much shaped my values, the way in which I look at people in the world, and the way in which I try to live. That includes an awareness of how things are, and that they don't necessarily have to be that way.
Here's a man who looked at the world as it was, and then looked at all of us and said, it doesn't have to be that way. That changed my life. That changed who I am. A man who was willing to face down perils and struggles that I'll never know. I mean, I grew up white and middle class and in a suburban neighborhood, but I remember my parents and how important he was to them. And I remember his words and how they have changed our entire world for the better.
This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity.
Berea College does really embody, through its great commitments and through living them out, Martin Luther King's true spirit of equality, justice, and diversity. From our founding by Reverend John Fee, we have had a profound commitment to social action, awareness, and change.
On a daily basis, I am amazed by Berea students, staff, and faculty. We are a diverse group of people from all corners of the world, speaking many languages and holding an assortment of beliefs.
In the same way that God has made us all of one blood, He has also created each of us with individual gifts and talents for the benefit of each other.
I am most inspired when we come together, each inspired by our own unique religious and moral perspectives, each shaped by our own upbringings and experiences, and each moved by our own calling and vocation.
Berea College and the community as a whole have been very supportive and welcoming from the first day I arrived here on campus. And I really appreciate the fact that I can exhibit aspects of my own culture without feeling the need to assimilate to American culture as some of my friends have at the other universities in the U.S.
As a historian, I like to teach about stories that give voice to those who have been silenced in the past. But our college too helps give voice through education to those who might not be able to attain it.
Berea College embodies the spirit of equity, justice, and diversity by caring about these things and setting high expectations and goals for both the outcomes of our work and how we go about our work. While we don't always meet our expectations, we seek to, and in our failures, we try to do better in the future.
So it's precisely the college's continual engagement in this process that I believe enables Berea College to embody a true spirit of equality, justice, and diversity. And I feel fortunate that my work here allows me to be part of this journey.
Where else could I teach a class of freshmen that includes white students from eastern Kentucky and Tennessee, as well as black students from cities like Louisville and Birmingham? And not only teach them, but teach a class on critical thinking and writing that engages those very values and issues upon which King and so many both before and after him have staked their lives. And more than just teach, to have those same students embrace each other and the work before us, and all the while learn, learn, and learn. Where else but Berea?
I'm very proud to have even a small association with the college in that regard, and to live next to this institution that made itself prominent, not by taking the easy road, but by making sure that everybody, rich and poor, black and white, men and women, had opportunities to grow and become their best selves.
So lifting every voice of inspiring every voice. That was Dr. King's gift, his legacy. And as I think about it, it is also one of Berea College's important legacies.
I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream.
He spoke to us like the prophet Amos when he challenged American society to notice that our African American citizens were still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination, and challenged us to avoid the tranquilizing drug of gradualism and to admit that now was the time to make real the promise of democracy. Now was the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now was the time to open doors of opportunity to all of God's children, and now was the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood.
Now in the last third of our existence, the third that benefits from the work of Dr. King and many other leaders, we have resumed the task and commitment to interracial education. Much has been accomplished in the last 50 years, and much remains to be done. We would not be where we are but for the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
And I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land.